Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to Leadership Lunch Chat. My name is Jennifer Wilson, and I'm here with my good friend Amy Vetter. And we are here to process leadership and management issues facing us, facing the profession, facing fellow leaders, facing clients, facing our families, whatever it may be. And today, what we're going to tackle or talk about is the importance of paying attention to mental health. Not only in ourselves, our own mental health or mental well-being, but also the mental well-being of those around us at work and in our families and friend circles and different communities. And so, we're going to process a number of things in this discussion and kind of share from our own perspectives, but also share things that we've learned. And I don't know, Amy, if you want to start or, how you want to begin this conversation.
Yeah, so I'm happy to start the conversation because I think right now so many people are struggling with stress and just being able to be okay each day and feel happy. And the thing about that is that each of us go through our individual experiences each day. And sometimes we aren't looking around us to see who is struggling as well because we're all just trying to make it through the day. It's not selfish, it's just the way life goes. But this session that we're really going to talk about today is really about looking up and looking around you and looking for signs of people that are in deep distress, and where, if it's possible to help or reach out or even to ask the question, it's really important. And I know, Jen, you've had a really hard loss this week in this area, and you were willing to share with all of us what's happened.
Yes. So my oldest daughter, who is 23 years old, she and her husband have a very, very best friend, and from college, and they sheltered together, and they hike national parks together, and that best friend lost his baby sister to suicide on Wednesday, and almost 18 or just 18 years old, almost graduating high school, headed to college, a promising, beautiful, wonderful person lost. And, lost suddenly and seemingly without warning. And it's just rocked our community. It's certainly rocked his family, all those connected to it. It's set me back in a big way. Like I just had this conversation with my middle child, who is a thinker, not a feeler. And she was like, you've got to stop putting yourself so much in the place of the mother. You're going to make yourself sick, Mom. And I said, I can't help it. I'm walking with her in my heart right now, thinking about just everything facing her. And, I have 3 daughters, and I can't believe what she has to deal with. And it's so sad. And so, what I do when I'm facing a big problem or upset or challenge or something that really feels like I'm in a hole over it, as I start reading, I start learning, I dig in and say, I want to get into action, but I feel like an idiot on the subject. I don't know how to help this family that's had the loss. I don't know how to help anybody else in my area, and within my reach, whatever that reach is. This is a form of reach here. I don't know how to help the people within my reach because I just don't know enough about the signs. And so I've spent the last, 48 hours reading and learning and gathering resources and ordering resources and reaching out to people that I know were touched by suicide before and asking them for help. And anyway, it's just been the beginning of a journey. But I will tell you that the one thing that I just keep thinking about is I am heads down. I am selfishly plowing through my stuff, my day, my thoughts, my workload, take care of my parents, take care of my kids, whatever it is. And I'm not lifting my eyes up and looking around carefully and listening carefully and being present with the people in my life to find the signs that would help me help them. And I just totally feel like I've gotten a kick in the tail to, shake myself out of that heads down, eyes closed, suicide denial, mental health denial that I've been in.
And I so appreciate you sharing that. And I think for so many people, these types of things have touched their lives, and not everybody talks about it. Or, like you said, whether it's been diversity and inclusion issues over the past year or whatever it is, your coping mechanism is to read, to learn, how can we do better? Which is honoring, the people that have been hurt in the past. And for someone to have to go to those lengths, obviously there was a lot of pain. And I think everybody, looks back and tries to say, what could I have done different? And that's the hard thing of, you can't undo anything. And a lot of times it's very private for people that are going through things like this. However, what we can do is learn how we go forward and what we can do to pay attention. And a lot of times what I talk about in work-life culture and just about ourselves is just what you were talking about, is how many demands we have in our day between our family, our work, friends, and we're trying to please everybody, but we forget we exist. Oftentimes we just don't take those pauses and say, I exist, I am, I'm here, and you exist, and the people around me exist, and everybody is a human. And it's hard to remember to do that. It's a practice. But if we honor people that have suffered and we go through something like this, the way we can honor is how we decide to learn from it going forward as well, and support it any way that we can.
Yeah. Well, we're getting ready to publish a blog that I wrote last night that talks about the signs to watch for, which sometimes don't manifest. So you can watch for them all day long and never see them. So, but signs of what to do if you see them. Because as I started learning about the signs, I thought, I see these in people I know now. And, like, now what? What do I do with this? And what is the appropriate action? And my daughter Grace was saying to me yesterday when we were discussing this in the car, she said, well, Mom, if you think somebody might be suicidal, you're supposed to just ask, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Or are you considering hurting yourself? Or are you considering suicide? And she said, a lot of people think, you're not supposed to ask head on like that because maybe it would cause them to think that. But instead, what it does is it removes the stigma of them telling you what they're thinking. They're afraid to say it. And I went and validated that by reading a bunch of resources, of course, because I didn't know if that was science. But she said, listen, we've been being taught about this in grade school and elementary school. Middle school and in high school. They teach us this stuff because it's so prevalent. One of the things I learned, Amy, is that in this country, in the United States of America right now, every 11 minutes, somebody commits suicide. And that the suicide rate has grown exponentially. From 2000 to 2017, it grew 50%. But that's before the pandemic. And I'm sure, with isolation, fear, anxiety, loss, people had loss in this pandemic, of course, loss of family members, loss of job, loss of, community, that I'm sure it's even higher, and so that's just a lot of people considering that as an option because they feel so hopeless or isolated.
Yeah. And I think it's important as well when we're talking about this is that it may not be suicide that everyone turn to. Depression is depression. And part of the work that we have to do when we pause and we step back is to be aware when we are feeling off ourselves. And also when we see other people feeling off, and not maybe asking them if they're suicidal, but asking them how they're doing, showing you care, showing that they exist, and that you notice, and if there's a way you can help. But when I do teacher training for people that want to become yoga instructors, a lot of times when we offer help, it's important too that we know our boundaries and when a medical person needs to step in. Because as a supporter, a nurturer, a friend, a family person, you want to do everything you can for that person, but we're not all qualified to do it, except to be alert or aware that something is wrong with someone that we work with or that we care about, and how to help them get help. And one of the things I try to do is take away the stigma of therapists and seeing psychologists, that it's a good thing.
Yes.
Just like we work out our bodies and we study for being experts in what we do, our mind, our mental health needs maintenance as well. And it's not a weakness. I remember when I wrote my book, Business Balance and Bliss, I talked about going to a therapist. And when I had some people review it originally, they're like, "You're really going to tell people that?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm going to tell people that. It is important that whatever you see on the outside of people doesn't mean that we don't all have the internal struggles, and we don't all have the stories that we need to work through." And when you go to someone that is medically trained to help, they also know what other resources you may need beyond that. And it isn't it's health, it's wellness. It's not something you do also when you're it isn't something that you have to do when it's at your worst. Sometimes when things are going well, that's the time to see a therapist too. Like, it is the maintenance of your mind. And our minds are monkey minds, and they spin and they create things that may never happen. And and that's what's scary about younger generation too, is that there's so many unknowns, and you're like, it'll get better if you just stick it through, or we have to go through the pain of something because it's so awful in a moment, but you just have to go through it. But having that help is so important. So sometimes you being aware of somebody else's depression or maybe signs of things is that you have gotten them help. It may not be you by yourself.
For sure. And I certainly have had counseling, and it's like coaching for the mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's sometimes coaching you to reframe the way your mind is working. Sometimes it's messaging to you is so negative and unempowering and hopeless and maybe interpretive, to the negative, to yourself or to others, that you need somebody else to help sort of, put a stop, help you put a stop to some of that, and shift and reframe your interpretations and reframe the way you're picturing things in your life. And that's a counselor. That's, a psychologist or a psychiatrist, one or the other. And for sure, if we feel like somebody needs counseling, we shouldn't be afraid to suggest it. And if we thought that they were really going to harm themselves, I think we have to, take even drastic action. Call 911 and try to get somebody to come and help them get somewhere where they can be observed for a few days. And that's a scary thing to do. That's the scariest thing to do. You don't want to get people in trouble, if you will. You don't want to have them have a stigma or mark on themselves, for being mentally unstable, because there's like some sort of looking good thing we have in this society that says we are all supposed to be the Rock of Gibraltar and mentally stable at all times. But this pandemic has thrown us all off. And mental instability isn't necessarily a permanent diagnosis. It's a transient thing, perhaps, and it can be circumstantial. And so we just want to get people through it so that they can come out on the other side and continue to live a full life and appreciate everything that there really is. And you're right. Younger people are living their lives differently than we did. It's video based. They have a video and pictorial playback, and they have an audience commenting on it all the time and things, which is super scary. And, the impact of that can be very scary for them. And so their setbacks seem way more magnified. Break up with a boyfriend or girlfriend, it seems significantly bigger, way more public, certainly. And, or lose a job or fail a test or not get into the school you wanted or whatever. Those things we all know as when you get to my age, you know that those things are small, little, tiny dots on the map of life. But in the moment, they hurt so bad that, people need help to process it. And we can't sort of hope they'll get over it.
Well, and the other thing to keep in mind too, in the workplace is when you're aware of someone else being affected by this, a daughter, a son, a spouse, but you work with the survivor. So when I was in college, I volunteered with a place called Fernside. And what it was a support center for people that have lost a loved one. And each night, the support center was for a different type of loss, whether it's suicide, whether it's an accident or cancer, whatever it is. And I think this is just another awareness thing in our work cultures that, when something like this happens, people are in shock. It happens in their families. It's like what your daughter said to you about judgment on how you process it versus how someone else processes it. But be aware that things like this come out maybe 6 months later or a year later. So it's really important that when you're going to support your coworkers or people that work for you, that you're not thinking like they should just be over it. Because things come in different times and waves in ways that we don't expect. And it's important as a leader, it's important as a coworker that we are supporting the people around us at whatever stage they are in grief or depression or whatever's going on in their life, and not feeling judgmental of where people are. So getting people support for those, what they're going through. And so many people have stories that we never ask. We're so focused on the workday or what's going on that we don't necessarily know what's going on personally. Or maybe 6 months later, it's kind of like, oh, should I even bring it up? Yes. How are you doing? And still acknowledging that person existed, that pain is pain and it takes time to go over it, and that you actually care will go a long way in nurturing the people around you in the workplace as well.
For sure. I don't know if you ever get over it. I think you move on, but that hurt is always there. And the desire to talk about the lost loved one is always there.
Mm-hmm.
It's very rare that people don't want to talk about it who've suffered the loss. It's the rest of us who try to tiptoe around it and step over it and pretend it didn't happen because we're afraid to bring up the hurt. But it actually hurts them more when we ignore it or disregard it or pretend like it didn't happen. It's so real for them, and it's real for them every day. Mm-hmm. And you're right. I mean, in the reading that I did about how I could support this family or how I could support somebody who's had a loss like this, it said everybody processes this in different ways at different timetables. And, you have to support them, not just by allowing them to talk and not trying to force them to be on some sort of get over it timetable that matches your expectations, but also allow them time to laugh and have fun. And, right in the center of the most horrible week of their life, there could be and should be opportunities to, smile and laugh and have fun. And that's not weird either. That's all
Right.
important, So anyway, just such an important topic, and so easy. Before this happened this week, folks, Amy and I were going to talk about, throwing out the timesheet and how to really do it, the how to do it. And we'll do that in the future. But when I think about it and, like I weigh these ideas, this is just so critical to all of us. And it's right now, more than ever before. And if we stop and say, how are you really? And you seem a little down lately. How come? We give people the opportunity to share whatever's there. A lot of us are sort of looking at the clock and thinking, I got to get through this call, or I've got to get past this conversation and on to the next. But taking that extra minute or two could save a life. And I know that I'm going to work really hard to be more present, and I'm not going to bury the subject of suicide in the backyard of my mind and hide it from myself like I have been doing. I'm gonna do everything I can to keep it front and center. I'm thinking about how I could get my church family involved. How this could be an outreach initiative for us. I've got to find a way to make something good happen from this very sad situation. And I hope that all of the folks that are listening today can turn around and, be present, be here right now, and be here right now with somebody to see if you can help them. And if there are any of the warning signs, we put a few resources in the comments here. When we post this in social media, we'll be sure also somewhere to post a link to the blog in case you're interested in the more detailed signs, actions to take, and then also how to support somebody who's had a suicide loss, whether it's recent or loss in the past, because that hurt is still there.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing something so fresh this week, but I think so many people are going through it. It was important for us to shift the conversation.
For sure.
Yeah.
And thanks everybody for your, continued participation in Leadership Lunch Chat. We'll see you all next week. Thanks.